Simpsons did it! This is a review of the Star Trek Voyager episode Blink of an Eye. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why the people on this planet are like so obsessed with Voyager, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. If nothing else, let the events of this episode be a lesson to the crews of all future starships. Avoid planets that look like gigantic snack cakes. I know, the clouds kind of look like powdered sugar, and you're imagining some delicious filling baked in the center, but just no. Keep away. The episode begins with Voyager discovering the aforementioned planet, which does indeed look quite tasty to me, who was raised on a steady diet of Hostess powdered donuts. And Tuvok notices that the planet has some unusual characteristics beyond the fact that it resembles a dry yet strangely addictive mass-produced snack food. For example, its gravity is unusually high for a planet of its size, more like a dwarf star, and it's rotating really fast, like 58 revolutions a minute. 58 RPMs? Never heard of that one. Even their record formats are different from ours. What a wondrous place the universe is. Captain Janeway orders Tom to move the ship into orbit so they can study this scrumptious-looking planet, but that high gravity catches the ship and starts pulling it in. Warp drive fails, impulse engines fail. It doesn't look good for our heroes. We cut to the surface of the planet, where we find a simple village of simple people living at something of a Stone Age level of development. One of them is preparing an offering at an altar when suddenly the ground shakes and a new star appears in the sky. Another guy walks up and says, "Oh, well, what it is that new star is a new god, the ground shaker, and it's pissed because you were offering fire fruit to the old god. So build a new altar for the ground shaker, and from now on, all the fire fruit goes to that god, okay?" Cool. Back aboard Voyager, the crew finds themselves in stationary orbit above the planet. The problem is, they're stuck. 7 of 9 discovers something else unique about this planet. It has a core made of tachyons. The core generates a powerful particle field, and Voyager is now trapped in that field. Voyager is also disrupting the field, which is causing occasional earthquakes on the surface of the planet. And one more thing, that tachyon core has also created a significant difference in the rate of the passage of time. A second on Voyager is almost a day on the planet's surface. Chakotay and B'Elanna launch a probe deeper into the atmosphere so they can better study what's happening on the surface. Chakotay hopes to be able to chart the progress of their civilization. B'Elanna says, yeah, we'll get to watch them invent better ways of beating each other over the head. Chakotay says, there's no guarantee they'll follow the Klingon model. And B'Elanna's like, I was talking about humans! Oh, got you, motherfucker! Down on the planet, history has progressed to something like the European Middle Ages. Voyager is still a mysterious star in the sky, and this guy, Kelamine, who is apparently a big shot in the local government, has come up with a plan to write a letter to the star, which they call the ground shaker, and ask it to stop, shaking the ground all the fucking time. See, Kelamine isn't superstitious like people used to be. He knows the ground shaker isn't a god. He believes that contained within that star is a city, and that city is ruled by someone much like himself, someone who can be reasoned with. He has an old monk write the letter, then he rolls it up, sticks it in a little hot air balloon, and releases the balloon to ascend to the sky, which is the best people could do at the time as far as sending a letter to outer space. On Voyager, Chakotay and B'Elanna study the data from the probe. They notice the high amount of iron the people on the planet are using to construct their buildings, probably to reinforce them against all the earthquakes Voyager is causing. The probe fails and breaks up in the planet's atmosphere. On the planet, it's now the equivalent of the mid-20th century. We drop in on a pair of astronomers, observing Voyager through a large optical telescope. One of them is also sending radio transmissions to Voyager, so far with no response. They're calling Voyager the Sky Ship now. And through their conversation, we learn how influential the presence of Voyager in the sky has been to this culture. These guys even played with toys as children, the skyship friends. One of the astronomers says to the other one, "You know, I've been sending the skyship mathematical codes all this time and I ain't heard shit. Why don't you try talking to them?" So the other astronomer takes the microphone and tries to think of something to say. Aboard Voyager, Seven and Chakotay are working in the astrometrics lab when they receive the radio messages, all of them in a rapidly playing jumble because of the time differential. Seven slows down the vocal message from the astronomer and plays it for the rest of the crew in the briefing room. Everyone is moved by this man's humble greeting, his plea to stop the earthquakes, and his invitation to come down and visit his people. The crew debates just getting it over with and making first contact. They've already had an effect on this culture, and at least if they made contact, these people would know Voyager didn't mean them any harm. They might even be able to learn something that would help them escape orbit. Janeway isn't in favor of first contact. For one thing, suddenly learning the truth about Voyager could be very disruptive to their culture and exacerbate the Prime Directive violation that's already occurred. For another, who knows if an away team could even survive in that accelerated time frame? That's when the doctor chimes in like, the time frame wouldn't do shit to me. I'm a hollow man. So they plan to send the doctor to the surface, but his orders are strictly to blend in with the locals. He can alter his appearance to look like them and dress like them. He's not supposed to tell anyone that he has anything to do with the skyship. Just observe and learn anything he can that might help Voyager free itself from the planet's gravity. The intention is to automatically beam the doctor back after 3 seconds Voyager time, which would be a few days planet time. But something goes wrong. By the time they're able to locate the doctor and beam him back, he's been gone 3 years planet time, long enough to learn a lot of useful information about the planet and also start a career as a singer in the local opera scene and fall in love. 3 years is a long time, Captain, the doctor says after he mentions Marisa, his partner. One needs companionship. Janeway's like, "Hey, you don't need to tell me I was fucking a hologram literally last week." The doctor tells Janeway that the civilization on the planet has developed to the brink of a space age, and the various nation-states are competing with each other over who can reach the skyship first. Janeway worries one of those nation-states will be firing a warhead rather than an astronaut, and so, using some of the data the doctor brought back, they attempt to break free from orbit. It doesn't work, and it causes another earthquake. Cut to a spacecraft launched from the surface. Aboard are 2 astronauts, Tarina, the mission commander, and Gaetana Retz, the pilot. They reach Voyager, even manage to dock with it and get on board. But when they have a look around, they notice something even stranger than they expected. They've walked right into a Twilight Zone episode. All the people aboard the skyship are standing perfectly still. And yet, they aren't in suspended animation. They look like they're going about their day. They just aren't moving. Tarina and Gaetana make it to the bridge, then they both collapse. When they do, they suddenly become visible to the Voyager crew. Harry also detects their spacecraft, which seems to have appeared out of nowhere at a docking port. The astronauts are rushed to sickbay. They collapsed due to the time differential. The transition from one time frame to another was too much for their bodies to handle. Unfortunately, Tarina dies. Gaetana wakes up and finds himself speaking to Captain Janeway, the commander of the skyship that, from Gaetana's perspective, has been floating above his world for hundreds of years. Talking with Janeway in private, Gaetana realizes that he's already been on Voyager long enough for everyone he's ever known to be long dead. He reflects on how central Voyager's presence in the sky has been to his life. When he was a baby, he had a skyship mobile hanging over his crib. Janeway tells him he's free to return to his planet whenever he wants, but she does ask for his help in interpreting the data the doctor brought back from his time on the planet. Gaetana and the doctor bond over sports. Apparently, the 2 big teams are Mountain and Lakeside, and while he lived on the planet, the doctor became quite the avid Mountain fan. In astrometrics, Katana helps Seven with some of the data the Doctor gathered, but while they're working, Voyager is attacked by antimatter charges being fired from the surface. Voyager is a sitting duck, and each impact weakens the ship's shields. Communication is impossible because the people on the surface don't know to adjust for the time differential. Janeway tells Katana he's got to go back, tell the people where he's been, convince them that Voyager means no harm and just wants to safely leave their planet. The Doctor escorts Katana to his ship, giving him a shot that will help him adjust to the time differential. Then, the Doctor makes a personal request. He asks Katana to find out what he can about someone named Jason Tabriz. "Who's that?" asks Katana. "He was my son," says the Doctor. "He's dead by now, but perhaps you could discover what happened to him. Maybe he had children or grandchildren. You could tell them about me." Katana promises that he will. Katana encounters some skepticism from the radio operator he speaks to during re-entry. For some reason, she doesn't believe that he's one of the long-lost astronauts who disappeared on that mission to the skyship from forever ago. Voyager's shields fail. The hull is about to breach. But then, two new objects are launched from the surface. Not warheads, but massive spacecraft that take up positions on either side of Voyager and tow it out of orbit using tractor beams. Then, Katana Retz materializes and apologizes for taking so long. Janeway offers to make official first contact now, but Katana says that won't be possible. He can only stay a few moments. That's as long as the temporal compensator he's wearing will allow. Tuvok announces that now that they're free from orbit, warp drive will be back online in a couple of hours. Katana says to Captain Janeway, "I feel like I'm saying goodbye to an old friend." And then he vanishes. We cut to a shot of the sky above the planet a short time later, or a long time later, depending on your perspective. Sitting there looking up at the sky is Katana Retz, now an old man. He sits in a spot near where the Stone Age man first saw that bright new star as he was making his offering to the gods. He watches as the bright star, the ground shaker, the sky ship, begins to recede, then disappears. The end. I hate this episode. No, I'm kidding. Come on. Actually, if you happened to see the video I did a few years ago about my top 5 Voyager episodes, you might remember that I picked this episode as my second favorite Voyager episode. It's just outstanding. It starts with a simple premise, then spends the episode thoroughly exploring that premise in ways that allow the episode to comment on history, religion, science, and how those things work together and against each other to shape the evolution of culture and civilization, and in ways that allow for some surprisingly effective, even moving character work. Let me start with how nicely put together this episode is. The structure is the familiar A story, B story format, but the B story doesn't follow a single character. It follows an entire civilization. Because of the difference in the rate of the passage of time on the planet compared to aboard Voyager, every time we cut back to the planet, centuries have gone by since the last time. Just like B'Elanna and Chakotay when they launch a probe to study this planet from orbit, we're only getting brief snapshots of moments in the history of these people. We watch them progress from superstitious people of the Stone Age who see Voyager as a god and its sudden appearance as an omen, all the way through to the astronauts who are finally able to reach Voyager in a spacecraft. Even though we don't spend more than a scene with any of the people from the planet, until Katana, the surviving astronaut that is, I find myself rooting for them as a species, as a society. We see them developing with each cut. They're always looking up toward Voyager in the sky, and they get closer and closer to figuring it out, until finally they do. Telling the story this way allows the writers to emphasize the big sci-fi idea, the time differential, by contrasting how little time has passed on Voyager with how much time has passed on the planet, and it also saves the ending from feeling like a deus ex machina or from falling flat due to the lack of agency from the Voyager crew. It's true that the Voyager crew has very little to do with their escape from the planet's gravity, but that's okay, because having the people of the planet rescue Voyager feels like a crowning achievement for that civilization we've been watching develop for however many centuries by that point. In terms of character work, that can be divided into two categories: characters who live on the planet and our regular Voyager characters. The character writing for those who live on the planet is especially outstanding because for most of them we only get a single brief scene, and yet everyone we meet from the planet comes through strong and clear. We might not know them very long, but we get a good sense of who they are right away. I'm especially touched by the astronomers. By this point in history, they know for certain that Voyager is not a god or a star or anything else it was once thought to be. They know it's a ship of some kind, and they speculate that there are people aboard it, perhaps people not unlike themselves. Unless they're all dead, as one of them cynically proposes. They aren't cynical people, though. They're reaching out into the universe, sending messages and hoping for a response. It's the least cynical thing you can do. And when their messages, especially the vocal message, are received by the crew of Voyager, the result is one of the best scenes in the episode. The message itself is beautiful, the thoughtful words of a scientist who isn't trying to place blame, but simply seeking understanding. He talks of how Voyager has gone from a thing of myth to an object of scientific study, and how he hopes that Voyager has not intended to cause the tremors that have been so damaging to their world, and he asks them to respond, or to come down from the skyship. And everyone listening to the message realizes that by the time they're sitting there hearing it, the man who sent it is long dead. He died, never receiving an answer, never knowing that anybody heard him. It reminds me of real-world projects like SETI or the Pioneer or Voyager probes. If there is someone else out there in the universe, some alien civilization, and they do eventually hear our messages or encounter our probes, by the time that happens, everyone who actually had anything to do with sending those messages or constructing those probes will be gone. We'll all be dead. Our species might not even exist anymore. It's possible that in the far, far future, some other intelligence will find a Voyager probe and learn about us, and no human will ever know it. That's a sad thought, but it's also what makes the act of reaching out so noble and so hopeful. For us, the obstacle is distance, the vast stretches of space that separate everything from everything else. For the people on the planet, in blink of an eye, the obstacle is time. By the time anyone on Voyager notices the message, the sender is long gone. The significance of that time difference and the way it warps how the people of the planet perceive Voyager and how the crew of Voyager perceives them is finally personified in the second half when Katana visits the ship. You know right away he's going to turn out to be an important character because he's played by Daniel Dae Kim, and even though he would go on to much greater notoriety after this with stints on Angel, Lost, ER, 24, the new version of Hawaii Five-0, and a bunch of other stuff, by the time this episode was originally broadcast, he was a familiar face from spending most of the 1990s guest starring or playing recurring roles on a long list of popular shows. If you watched any significant amount of TV back in the day, and you watched this episode when it was originally broadcast, you might not have known him by name, but you probably recognized Daniel Dae Kim when you saw him. And damn, does he do a good job here. Like the other characters we meet from the planet, he makes an impression right away, but because we get a little bit more time with him than we got with the other inhabitants of his planet, he also gets to develop beyond that first impression. He's an astronaut, sure, but he's an astronaut who feels like he's in over his head. He tells Janeway that he was selected for the mission because of his skill as a pilot, but he doesn't think of himself as very brave. Shortly after they board Voyager, he tells Tarina, his commander, that he wants to leave. Even before that, while they're still on their spacecraft, he votes against docking with Voyager. That wasn't part of their original mission. He's cautious, even timid. And when he wakes up in sickbay and realizes where he is and who he's talking to, he remains calm and professional, but he's also clearly a little overwhelmed. He turns out to be the ideal representative for his people. Extraordinary in some respects, an astronaut, a pilot, chosen for an historic space mission, but ordinary in many others. He's not a genius or a political leader or anything of the kind. He's just a person, one of the millions of people who have spent their lives looking up at that bright star in the sky and wondering what it is, what it wants. Gaetano is fully aware of the effect the time differential has had on his own life. He is now a man out of time, having outlived his entire generation in the space of what feels to him like a few hours. And he's also aware of the effect that time differential is having on his entire world. He sees Voyager for what it is, a ship of exploration that travels the galaxy, and he worries that his people will never be able to do the same thing. Because of the time differential. They're out of step with the rest of the universe. When Seven of Nine tries to reassure him by pointing out how adaptable and industrious his people are, he tells her that the focal point of their efforts to progress has been Voyager. Once Voyager leaves, he fears his people might lose their drive. They'll have no mystery left to solve. See what I mean when I say the episode thoroughly explores the premise? It really feels like the writers of this episode gave some serious thought to the many possible effects that this time differential would have on the people from this planet and the people aboard Voyager, and found ways of translating those effects into compelling pieces of story. Gaetano is present for what I think is the best scene in the episode, his final conversation with the Doctor. His earlier conversation with the Doctor, where they talk about sports, is also great, but it proves to just be the setup for that following scene. The Doctor is the member of the Voyager crew who has the most direct contact with the planet and the most profound experience. The conceit of having him stuck on the planet for years when it was just supposed to be a few days, and all of it taking place across just a few minutes aboard Voyager, is great. Another clever way to take advantage of the main premise, but what elevates it to something really special is the way the writers don't settle for clever. They let us know that in the years he spent on the surface, the Doctor became genuinely attached to this place, its culture, and its people, not just in the abstract, but to individual people as well. He made friends, fell in love, had a family. The scene between the Doctor and Gaetano when the Doctor tells him about Jason, his son, is probably my favorite scene of the Doctor in the entire series. It carries the same poignancy as the astronomer's message to Voyager, but depicted at a human level. The Doctor knows that his son is dead by now, but he asks Gaetano if he might find a grandchild and tell that grandchild about the Doctor so that someone connected with his son will know who he is and where he went, so that someone will know that the Doctor didn't mean to just disappear like that one day, didn't mean to abandon him. It's heartbreaking and it's beautiful. Separated from a life he clearly enjoyed and people he clearly loved by forces he cannot control, the Doctor, like the astronomer, reaches out in the best way available to him. The person he really wants to talk to is gone, but hopefully someone will get the message. Someone will know he was here. The episode is so good, it even breathes life into parts of the show that had been withering away for years, especially the characterization of the supporting cast. No other character has as emotionally significant an experience with the planet as the Doctor, but we see Tom Paris empathizing with the astronomer and passionately arguing that his message deserves an answer, and we see Chakotay exhibiting genuine interest in the civilization on the planet, wanting to study it and watch it develop. Also, it's Chakotay who comes up with the crucial bit of information necessary to find the Doctor after his transporter signal is lost when he beams down to the planet. Chakotay suggests looking in the arts district, near the opera houses and concert halls, because he knows that the Doctor has an interest in opera and singing. It's almost as if these are real people who actually know each other. Blink of an Eye was written by Scott Miller and Joe Menosky from a story by Michael Taylor. Menosky, as I mentioned in a recent review, is a prolific Star Trek writer, working mostly on TNG and Voyager with shorter stints on DS9 and later Discovery. He's the writer who started inserting the number 47 into everything. And that's not all he is. He's a good writer. Scott Miller previously wrote the story for the Voyager episode 30 Days, and Michael Taylor was a credited writer on 20 Voyager episodes, and he also wrote 4 episodes of Deep Space Nine, including The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight. 2 of the best episodes of any Star Trek series ever, so yeah, he's pretty good. The episode was directed by Gabrielle Beaumont, a veteran TV director who was the first woman to ever direct an episode of a Star Trek series. She directed 7 episodes of TNG, 1 episode of DS9, and this single episode of Voyager, which was also the last episode of Star Trek she ever directed. Talk about going out on a high note. It's not often that you get a character-driven story where one of the characters is an entire civilization. Then again, it's not often that you get an episode of Voyager, or hell, any Star Trek show really, that's as good as this one. It balances a clever sci-fi gimmick with emotion and humanity and becomes a thoughtful, moving reflection on the desire to transcend our mortality and on the power of curiosity and hope. It may all have gone by in the blink of an eye from the perspective of the Voyager crew, but from where I was sitting, it felt timeless. Those are my thoughts on Blink of an Eye. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next week as I begin a brand new batch of reviews. I'll be returning to a theme from a previous batch, holodeck episodes, because there are so many holodeck episodes. This will be a supersized batch of 8 episodes, and it will begin next time as I review an episode from the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation titled 11001001. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.